Okay, the question is this person feels like they're not good at suffering and that they give up when it gets hard and they're looking for tips. And this ties in a little bit actually with the question about negative splitting and being conservative with pacing, because I think these are, there's an element that's similar here, which is that it's really scary to go deep. It's scary to go to those really suffery places. Um, there's kind of the physical discomfort, but there's also a real vulnerability that comes with going deep. Like, what if you go deep and it's not good enough? That is really scary. Whereas if you hold back a little bit in the back of your mind, I mean, there's telling other people, but then in the back of their mind, whether it's kind of something you're aware that you're doing or not, there's a way that you can kind of tell yourself, well, I didn't actually try my hardest. And so if you're unhappy with the outcome, you can still in the back of your mind have this knowledge that you didn't try your hardest, which is a little bit comforting. Like you didn't let yourself down in the same way as if you went completely as hard as you could and it wasn't good enough. There is a real laying bare of oneself to go as deep as you can, and that is a little bit scary. So I think the fear of suffering, yeah, it comes from a couple different places. There's like the physical pain, but also that emotional laying bare of oneself that I kind of just mentioned, and that can be a bit scarier than the physical pain, I think. You know, the earlier question about staying focused despite crashes and mechanicals, and I talked about some in-race process goals. And one of the things I talked about was following wheels. And I think that ties in here as well, because adding some outside stimulation can really help. Like if you have a way of pacing yourself to a really, really intense, suffery place, going really deep, and the pacing comes from somewhere aside, something besides yourself making it that hard, sometimes it's a little bit easier to go to those really deep suffery places. Like if you are just following a wheel and the intensity ramps up and up and up and up, and all of a sudden you are going really super deep kind of without having to make the decision yourself. Now, there are people who, you know, when you're following a wheel, you tell yourself, I can't do it, and you let go. But I still think these kind of opportunities for outside stimulation can get you to a place of going deeper than if you are just setting the pace yourself. So that would be a tool that you could use is to follow a wheel, whether that's on the road, off the road, or off road. But having some outside stimulation. You can kind of trick yourself a little bit into the suffering. So I actually talked about this with a friend recently in the context of really, really super hard mountain bike rides where the climbing is just so incredibly steep. We call it the no talking zone, where the intensity is entirely terrain dependent. There is no going easy on a pitch this steep. And to me, these are situations where there is no thinking, there's only doing. And I love these situations because you go to this really suffery place. I mean, this is the flow state where you are not thinking, you're only doing, you're only reacting. And this is a way that you could practice it. So yeah, maybe you find a climb that just to get up it, just to hold a steady cadence means you're going to go to a really suffery place. Again, this is similar to following a wheel where the intensity is independent of your effort. In order to keep moving, you have to suffer really hard. And so again, this would be an opportunity for you to kind of trick yourself into going really deep. So yeah, these situations where you can kind of strip away the decision making around suffering, and there's no thinking, just doing. I think these are places where you might be able to practice suffering, and ultimately, I think that's the goal. So that sensation becomes a little bit less scary. So these are like the getting yourself to accept kind of the willingness, the mental, emotional willingness to go to these places, but there is just the physical discomfort of it, which, to be honest, I think is more challenging. It's much simpler, but it is more challenging because it's harder to kind of trick yourself around the physical discomfort. It's either there or it's not. It's a cliche, but we say get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to practice suffering. So I would say when you get to these really deep, suffery places and you tell yourself that you can't do it or you start to back off, I would encourage you to be really curious and observant about the thoughts that you're having just prior to that. What are the thoughts you're having right before you tip over the edge and back off? And I know it's really hard to be aware of your thoughts in those moments, but I think that will hold a key as to what it is that's making you unwilling to suffer. Hone in on those sensations, hone in on the thoughts that you're having right before you back off. Stamp those thoughts in your memory. Do some visualization around that. Think about the sensations that you're having when you are suffering, and be very specific with that visualization. Imagine every part of the buildup. Even think about a specific workout, a specific race, the build up to that really intense suffering, how you feel, what you're doing that gets you there, who's around you, what the terrain is like, all of the specifics, and imagine yourself embracing that sensation and sitting in it and experiencing it and continuing to take it on. Again, I said this earlier about visualization, but don't imagine it being easy. You have to imagine it being really, really incredibly hard. We are talking about suffering here, but you imagine yourself managing it, sitting in it, being okay with it. And again, it's like a dress rehearsal for when it happens. So I hope that is helpful.